Hi there. I'm Randy Patterson, a psychologist in clinical practice, and this is Psychology Salon, a channel about psychological issues. If you like this kind of thing, click subscribe. This is the fifth in a series of videos on the process of grief, and we're using some of the insights suggested by William Worden in his great book, Grief Counselling and Grief Therapy. Worden talks about 4 tasks of grief, and I've covered the first 3: accepting the reality of the loss, experiencing the pain of grief, and adjusting to a world that our loved one has left. Today, the 4th one: reinvesting that emotional energy that initially was invested in the relationship with the person we've lost, and then in the process of grief itself. Now, that's a slight distortion of what Worden actually says. For him, task 4 is to withdraw emotional energy and reinvest it in another relationship. He's focusing here on the idea of attachment. We've had an attachment relationship with the person that we've lost, and at some point we have, in effect, detached and can use that attachment potential in a new relationship. And he's right. We may not mourn our loss forever. If it was a romantic relationship we had with that person, maybe our romantic life is not over. Must we spend the rest of life alone? But I think we can go a little broader than this, reinvesting not just in a new relationship of the same general type, but in the world itself, in life itself. If it's a parent we have lost, we may not search out a new parental figure. If it's a child, we may not have another child. And sometimes when the great love of our life comes to an end in death, we may think, that was wonderful, and I don't need to recreate it with someone else. When we lose someone, they've occupied a position in our life, and now there's a gap where they once were. Reinvesting is about looking at what we might like to do with that space. It might well be a new relationship, but it might be a new project. You always wanted a dog, but your partner was allergic. Well, you can have a dog. You wanted to live in a smaller town or a bigger one, but that wasn't your partner's idea of a good life. Now you can. You wanted to move to Iceland, but your mother in Calgary really depended on you. Maybe now you can go. Your partner never liked travel, and you always wanted to see the world. Now you have some of the time you used to spend with them, and maybe you're not abandoning them by going off to explore. There's probably some practical issues involved. Hey, the idea was to travel with someone, and he wasn't into it. Who do I go with now? And there are practical ways of working with that. Friends who like to travel, or small group travel companies where you spend a week or 2 seeing a new country with 10 or 12 people. When Worden talks about forming new relationships, he brings up the obvious concern, a sense of disloyalty. Here, this other person was supposedly so important to me, and I'm replacing them. But of course, you're not. You can't replace them, not even if you could clone them. This isn't a replacement relationship. It's a new relationship, something different, and it does not erase what came before. But that fear of disloyalty isn't restricted to new relationships. Your partner hated classical music, and now you're an usher at the symphony. That can feel disloyal too. They believed that political party was an abomination, or that meditation group was a bunch of flakes, and now you're going. In every relationship, we adjust ourselves, at least somewhat, to the other person. We look for common ground, and we live more of our life there. And maybe we take on part of their life. Our partner loves golf, and we don't care much about it, but we take up golf. It gives us time together. Fine. But that function is no longer served. It's not disloyal to sell the golf clubs. We hope that this give and take is on both sides, something both people do. You go to hockey games, they go to the art gallery. But often it's a little bit more one person who takes on the life of the other. And even though they've given more, it feels more disloyal to them to reclaim their own interests when that relationship has ended. That can take some work. Sometimes one person has put their own life and interests entirely aside and made themselves into a supportive planet orbiting their partner, the star of the show. The partner passes, and there they are, orbiting in dark space, loyally living out the same life for the benefit of a person who is no longer there, feeling either lost or faintly ridiculous, but too consumed by guilt or grief to rebuild their life in a new form. Sometimes that's where counseling can help. If much of grief is looking back at a life we have lost, this reinvestment stage is about developing the courage to look forward, to let go of the elements of the former life that no longer serve a useful function, and build something new. A life into which the lost loved one might not fit, should they return. But by this point, we realize they're not going to return. They have passed. They are still a major part of our life, but it is a part that has happened. We do not have to live as though that part is in the present. We drove them to work every morning for 20 years. It is not disloyal to stop driving downtown when there is no one to drop off. It is not disloyal to take up our interest in the symphony, or hockey, or travel, or small town life, or dogs. We are the living. Our task is to live our lives. We are not sentenced to curate the museum of the lost. We keep elements of them. We honor their memory, if we can, the life they led, and we lead ours. So those are just a few ideas about the role of grief in our lives. Again, grief is something that almost all of us will experience in one shape or another, and it can be enormously complex. In any series of glib little videos like these, many of the nuances will be lost. This is not a substitute for talking with someone who can come to understand the particulars of your own situation. Much of what I've said may not apply. Much of it you may disagree with. Fine. This is YouTube. Don't swallow anything you see here. Not automatically. And feel free to comment. There is more to grief than just this. But I hope that at least some of this can help. Maybe this is something you're going through. Or maybe it's just preparation for one unwelcome day. There are other videos on this channel on the psychology of everyday life. Click the subscribe button for more. I also have an online course site, psychologysalon.teachable.com, with programs for professionals and for the general public. And my guide, The Assertiveness Workbook, is available from bookstores and online booksellers. Thanks for watching.